The Great Council chamber on Nexus Prime had seen many dark days, but none like this. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in the crystal seats that formed rings around the central speaking platform. The air hummed with nervous energy as translators worked overtime to keep up with the dozens of languages being spoken at once. Fleet Admiral Taemin of the Zenthari Empire stood at the center podium, his blue-scaled hands gripping the edges as he delivered the grim news. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much death in recent weeks. "The Void Hunters have taken 3 more systems," he announced, his words echoing through the chamber. "Kepler 442, Ross 128, and New Geneva are gone, completely stripped. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid belt has been consumed." A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Some covered their faces with hands, claws, or tentacles depending on their species. Others sat in stunned silence. Taemin continued, his voice growing heavier with each word. "Our combined fleet engaged them at Kepler 442. 12,000 ships from 15 different worlds. The battle lasted 6 hours." He paused, looking around the chamber. "We lost 11,700 ships. The Void Hunters lost 12. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates jumped to their feet, shouting in their native languages. The Etherian counselor Veltar, ancient even by the standards of his long-lived race, raised one withered hand for silence. "How is this possible?" Veltar's voice was like wind through old trees. "Our weapons are advanced. Our shields are strong. How can machines from 1,000 years ago be so powerful?" Taemin's face was grim. "They adapt. Every weapon we fire at them, they learn to defend against it. Every tactic we use, they counter within minutes. Their ships rebuild themselves using the metal from our destroyed vessels. We are not just losing battles. We are making them stronger." A crystalline delegate from the outer rim stood up, her voice chiming like broken glass. "What about the weapon systems from the old wars? The planet killers? The starbreakers?" "Use them all," Taemin replied. "They adapted to those too. The Void Hunters are not just machines. They are learning machines. Every attack teaches them how to defend against the next one." The chamber fell into a heavy silence. These beings had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had ended wars, prevented famines, and brought peace to countless worlds. Now they faced an enemy that seemed unstoppable. One by one, each species reported their military strength. The Zenthari offered their plasma fleets. The Etherians promised their energy manipulation technology. The crystalline beings volunteered their diamond-hard warships. Each contribution was noted, catalogued, and added to what everyone hoped would be enough to stop the Void Hunters before they consumed the entire galaxy. Then came humanity's turn. Ambassador Sora walked to the podium with calm, measured steps. She was smaller than most beings in the chamber, her plain gray diplomatic uniform making her look even more insignificant, next to the elaborate robes and natural armor of the other delegates. The humans were the newest members of the Galactic Federation, having joined only 50 years ago. Their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards. Most species viewed them as enthusiastic but backward newcomers who were still learning how things worked in civilized space. Sora placed her hands on the podium and looked around the chamber. Her dark eyes were steady, showing no sign of the fear that was evident in so many other faces. "Earth will contribute. 1 ship," she said simply. The silence that followed was different from the heavy quiet that had marked the rest of the session. This was the silence of disbelief. A gaseous delegate from the Nebula territories was the first to speak, his voice bubbling through his translation device. "Did the translator malfunction? Did she say 1 ship?" Sora nodded calmly. 1 ship. The chamber erupted again, but this time it was not chaos born of fear. It was laughter. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that comes when stress needs release and someone says something absurd. A young Zenthari officer leaned over to his commander. "Perhaps they do not understand the scale of this threat." Taemin was not laughing. Something in the human ambassador's manner troubled him. She stood there calmly while beings who could destroy planets with their bare hands laughed at her contribution. Either she was a fool or she knew something they did not. The crystalline delegate chimed again, her voice carrying amusement. "Honored Ambassador, we face an enemy that destroyed 12,000 ships in a single battle. Perhaps Earth could spare more than 1 vessel." Sora shook her head. "1 ship is what we are sending. One ship is what we believe is necessary. The laughter died away as delegates realized the human was serious. Veltar leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying Sora carefully. "Young ambassador," he said, his voice gentle but concerned, "I have lived for 2,000 years. I was here when the Void Hunters first appeared. I watched them consume 17 star systems before we found a way to stop them. That was with weapons and knowledge we no longer possess. One ship, no matter how advanced, cannot stand against such power." Sora met his gaze without flinching. "With respect, Counselor Veltar, you have never seen a human ship in actual combat. Because there has never been a war since you joined us," Taemin pointed out. "Your species has known only peace for 50 years. You have no idea what real warfare looks like." Something flickered in Sora's eyes. For just a moment the mask of diplomatic calm slipped, and Taemin caught a glimpse of something that made his scales stand on end. It was not fear or uncertainty. It was the look of someone who knew exactly what warfare looked like and was not afraid of it. "Administrator, we appreciate your concern," Sora said, her voice returning to its neutral diplomatic tone. "But our decision stands. Earth will send one ship." The session continued for several more hours as military leaders planned their desperate defense. Fleets would gather at strategic points. Weapons would be distributed. Evacuation plans would be prepared for civilian populations. Through it all, Sora sat quietly in her designated seat, saying nothing more. She watched as species with technology centuries ahead of Earth's planned their battles. She listened as beings who had mastered faster-than-light travel and energy manipulation discussed their strategies. And she waited. As the session finally ended and delegates began filing out, Veltar approached the human ambassador. His movements were slow but purposeful. "Ambassador Sora," he said quietly, "may I ask you something in private?" She nodded, and they moved to a quiet alcove away from the other departing delegates. "You are not afraid," Veltar observed. "Everyone else in that chamber is terrified. We face extinction, and you sit there as calm as still water. Why?" Sora looked up at the ancient being. For a moment she seemed to be deciding how much to tell him. "Counselor Veltar," she said finally, "has it ever occurred to you to wonder what humanity was doing for the 1,000 years before we joined the Federation?" The old Etherean's eyes widened slightly. "You were developing your technology, learning to travel between stars." "Yes," Sora agreed. "We were learning, but we were also preparing." "Preparing for what?" Sora smiled, and for the first time since the session began, it was not a diplomatic smile. It was the smile of someone who held a very powerful secret. For this. The Luna shipyards hung in space like a metal city, hidden behind a field of projected asteroids that fooled even the most advanced sensors. What appeared to be empty space to the rest of the galaxy was actually humanity's greatest secret. A construction facility larger than most moons. Captain Dong-hyun stood on the observation deck of the battleship Indomitable, watching the final preparations for departure. The ship stretched out before him like a moving mountain of metal and purpose. Unlike the elegant flowing designs favored by other galactic species, the Indomitable was built like a fortress. Every surface was armored. Every angle was designed for war. "Final systems check complete, Captain," reported Engineer Jiwoo from her station. Her fingers moved across holographic displays that showed the status of thousands of different components. "All weapon systems green. All defensive systems green. All propulsion systems operating at peak efficiency." The Indomitable was not beautiful by galactic standards. Whereas Anthari ships were sleek and curved, it was angular and brutal. Where Etherian vessels glowed with soft energy, it was dark and silent. Where crystalline warships sparkled like jewels, it was matte black and nearly invisible against the void of space. But it was absolutely deadly. "Crew report," Dong-hyun requested. Medical Officer Hee-jin looked up from her workstation. 3,000 crew members aboard and accounted for. All physical and psychological evaluations complete. "The crew is ready, Captain," Dong-hyun nodded. He had served with many of these people for years. They had trained together, planned together, and prepared for this moment since humanity first learned about the Void Hunters from ancient galactic records. While the rest of the galaxy had forgotten about the machine threat, humanity had been getting ready. Navigator Yu-jin plotted their course to the Helix Nebula, where long-range sensors had detected the latest Void Hunter assault. "Hyperspace route calculated, Captain. We can reach the combat zone in 18 hours using the deep space passages." The ones that other species consider too dangerous to use? Asked Dong-hyun. Yes, sir. But our navigational computers can handle the gravitational stress that would tear apart most ships. The truth was that human ships were built differently than anyone else's, while other species had focused on elegant engineering and efficient power systems. Humans had focused on one thing: making sure their ships could survive anything. Every critical system had 3 backups. Every weapon had multiple power sources. Every piece of equipment was designed to keep working even if half the ship was destroyed. It was not beautiful, but it was effective. Engineering Chief Da-Yoon joined them on the bridge, her hands still dirty from last-minute adjustments to the ship's systems. Captain, all weapons are loaded and ready. Kinetic bombardment system is fully charged. Antimatter torpedoes are armed. Exotic matter disruptors are calibrated. Energy shields are at maximum power. The list went on for several minutes. Where most galactic warships carried 1 or 2 types of weapons, the Indomitable carried 17 different weapon systems. Each one was designed to handle a different type of threat. And if the enemy adapts to our weapons? Dong-hyun asked. Da-Yoon grinned. Then we switch to something they have never seen before. That is the beauty of the human approach, Captain. We do not perfect one technology. We perfect everything. The final departure preparations took another 2 hours. During that time, Dong-hyun reviewed the intelligence reports about the Void Hunters. The ancient machines were impressive, he had to admit. Their ability to adapt to new threats was remarkable. Their construction technology was beyond what most species could achieve. But they had one weakness that their builders had not considered. They learned by experience. They adapted to weapons and tactics they had encountered before. The problem was that they had never encountered humans before. Communications, open a channel to Earth Command, Dong-hyun ordered. The face of Admiral Kyung-soo appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Dong-hyun could see the bustling activity of Earth's military headquarters, hidden deep beneath the surface of the planet. Captain Dong-hyun reporting ready for departure, Admiral. Understood, Captain. You know your orders. Engage the Void Hunters and assess their capabilities. Do not reveal the full extent of our technology unless absolutely necessary. What if absolutely necessary means the survival of the Galactic Federation? Admiral Kyung-soo was quiet for a moment. Then you show them what humanity is really capable of. The channel closed and Dong-hyun turned to his crew. These men and women represented the best of human military training. They had spent years learning to operate weapon systems that most galactic species did not even know existed. They had practiced battle tactics that had never been used in actual combat. All stations, prepare for departure, Dong-hyun announced over the ship's communication system. The Indomitable slowly moved away from the Luna shipyards. As it cleared the asteroid field that concealed the construction facility, its true size became apparent. The ship was massive, easily the size of a small city, but it moved through space with surprising grace for something so large. Hyperspace engines charging, reported Yoo-jin. Jump to the Helix Nebula in 30 seconds. Dong-hyun settled into his command chair. In a few hours, they would reach the site of the latest Void Hunter attack. If the intelligence reports were correct, they would find a battle already in progress. The combined galactic fleet would be fighting desperately against an enemy that could adapt to any weapon they used. And then a single human ship would arrive. 10 seconds to jump, Yoo-jin announced. The crew strapped themselves into their stations. Hyperspace travel was rough on human ships because they were built for durability rather than comfort, but it was also faster than the methods used by other species. Jump! Space twisted around the Indomitable as it entered hyperspace. The view outside the windows became a swirling mass of colors and energy that human eyes were not designed to see. Most galactic species needed special equipment to survive hyperspace travel. Humans just closed their eyes and waited for it to be over. During the 18-hour journey, the crew made final preparations. Weapons Officer Jae-ho ran diagnostic tests on every gun and missile system. Engineer Ji-woo checked and rechecked the power distribution systems that would need to operate perfectly during combat. Medical Officer Hye-jin prepared the medical bay for casualties, though she hoped there would not be any. The ship's design was supposed to prevent that, but she had learned never to trust completely in technology. Captain, Communications Officer Min Seo called from her station. I am receiving distress signals from the Helix Nebula. Multiple species requesting immediate assistance. The Void Hunters have engaged the galactic fleet. How long until we arrive? 2 hours, 17 minutes, Dong-hyun nodded. All crew prepare for combat. This is what we have trained for. Remember your duties, trust your equipment, and show the galaxy what human engineering can do. As the Indomitable raced through hyperspace toward its destination, the crew settled into the calm readiness that came from years of preparation. They knew they were about to face an enemy that had destroyed thousands of ships. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew something that the rest of the galaxy did not. Humanity had never built a ship that was meant to lose a battle. The Indomitable was not just a warship. It was a statement. It was proof that while other species had spent 1,000 years in peace, humanity had spent that time preparing for war. And now, finally, it was time to show the galaxy what that preparation had accomplished. 1 hour to arrival, Yujin announced. All weapons, final systems check, ordered Jae-ho. All systems green across the board, reported Da-eun. Captain Dong-hyun looked out at the swirling colors of hyperspace and smiled. In 1 hour, the galaxy would discover that humanity had not sent one ship because that was all they could spare. They had sent one ship because that was all they needed. The Helix Nebula blazed with the light of dying ships. When the Indomitable dropped out of hyperspace, Captain Dong-hyun immediately understood why the galactic fleet was losing. The scene before them was not a battle. It was a massacre. Void hunter ships moved through space like geometric nightmares. Each one was a perfect arrangement of dark metal and glowing energy, shaped like mathematical equations come to life. They were beautiful in the way that death was beautiful. Cold and precise and utterly without mercy. Captain, I count 43 Void Hunter vessels, reported Navigator Yujin, her voice tight with controlled fear. They are systematically destroying the galactic fleet. On the main screen, they watched a Zenthari cruiser fire its plasma cannons at a Void Hunter destroyer. The brilliant blue energy struck the enemy ship's hull and seemed to disappear, absorbed into the dark metal. Within seconds, the Void Hunter ship returned fire with an identical plasma beam. The Zenthari vessel exploded in a ball of superheated gas. They are learning, observed Engineer Jiwoo. Every weapon fired at them teaches them how to use that same weapon. Another explosion lit up the nebula as a crystalline diamond ship shattered under bombardment from its own crystal-cutting beam, now used against it by the machines that had learned its secrets in moments. Communications incoming from the Galactic Fleet, announced Minseo. Admiral Taemin is hailing us. The face of the Zenthari commander appeared on screen. His bridge was filled with smoke and sparks flew from damaged consoles behind him. Human vessel, you must retreat immediately. The situation is hopeless. We have lost over 2,000 ships in the past 4 hours. What is the enemy's tactical disposition? Asked Dong-hyun calmly. Taemin stared at him in disbelief. Did you not hear me? This is not a battle you can win. Our entire combined fleet is being destroyed. One ship cannot make a difference here. Admiral, with respect, you have never seen what one of our ships can do. Behind Taemin, another explosion rocked his bridge. Human captain, I have been fighting wars since before your species had space travel. Trust me when I tell you that this enemy cannot be defeated by conventional means. Dong-hyun turned to his weapons officer. Jae-ho, target the nearest Void Hunter vessel. Single kinetic round, half power. Sir, there is a Void Hunter cruiser approximately 12,000 kilometers off our starboard side. It appears to be studying the debris from destroyed galactic ships. Fire. The Indomitable's main kinetic cannon was a masterpiece of human engineering. While other species had developed energy weapons and exotic matter disruptors, humans had perfected the ancient art of throwing very heavy objects very fast. The tungsten round that left the ship's gun was accelerated to 30% of light speed in less than a second. The Void Hunter cruiser detected the incoming projectile and immediately began defensive maneuvers. Its adaptive armor shifted and changed, preparing to absorb or deflect the energy weapon it expected to encounter. Instead, it was struck by 6 tons of metal moving at 90,000 kilometers per second. The impact was visible from 40,000 kilometers away. The Void Hunter ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a perfect geometric shape studying the wreckage of galactic vessels. The next moment it was a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated plasma. The silence on the communication channel was absolute. What? Admiral Taemin finally managed to say. Was that? Kinetic bombardment, replied Dong-hyun. We accelerate solid projectiles to relativistic speeds and let physics do the rest. But how did you penetrate their adaptive armor? Their armor adapts to energy weapons, force fields, and exotic matter. It does not adapt to being hit by a mountain moving at light speed. On the tactical display, the remaining Void Hunter ships had stopped their attack on the Galactic fleet. Every single one had turned toward the Indomitable. Their scanning beams swept over the human ship, trying to understand what had just happened. "Captain," reported Yujin, "all Void Hunter vessels are converging on our position. They are moving to engage us directly." "How many?" 42 ships ranging from destroyers to dreadnoughts. The largest is approximately 3 times our size. Donghyun nodded calmly. "All crew battle stations. Jae-ho, prepare the full kinetic array. Jiwoo route power to all weapon systems. Hee-jin, secure medical bay for combat operations." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. This was what they had trained for during countless simulations. They knew their ship, they knew their weapons, and they knew their enemy's weakness. The Void Hunters approached in perfect formation, their geometric ships arranged in mathematical precision. They had analyzed the kinetic weapon and were already adapting their tactics. Several ships extended energy shields designed to deflect solid projectiles. "They learn fast," observed Communications Officer Min Seo. "Yes," agreed Dong-hyun, "but they can only adapt to weapons they have encountered." "Jae-ho, fire antimatter torpedoes." "Sir, antimatter torpedoes away." The Void Hunter ships detected the incoming missiles and immediately began countermeasures. Their point defense systems engaged, firing precise energy beams designed to detonate the torpedoes before impact. It was exactly the right response to antimatter weapons. Unfortunately for them, these were not antimatter weapons. The torpedoes were actually delivery systems for exotic matter warheads that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. When they reached their targets, they did not explode. They simply convinced local reality that the Void Hunter ships had never existed in the first place. 4 more enemy vessels vanished without a trace. "Impossible," breathed Admiral Taemin over the communication link. "What kind of technology is this?" "Human technology," replied Dong-hyun. "We have been developing it for a very long time." The remaining Void Hunter ships paused again, their artificial intelligence systems struggling to process weapons that violated their understanding of physics. They had encountered antimatter before. They had encountered kinetic weapons, but they had never encountered anything that could erase matter from reality itself. While they processed this information, Dong-hyun gave his next order. "All weapons, free fire. Show them what human engineering really looks like." The Indomitable opened up with everything it had. Kinetic cannons fired solid rounds at light speed. Antimatter torpedoes streaked toward their targets. Energy beams that could cut through neutron star material reached across space. Gravity bombs created localized black holes that lasted for exactly 0.3 seconds. Quantum disruptors attacked enemy ships in the past, present, and future simultaneously. And when the Void Hunters adapted to those weapons, the humans switched to new ones. Temporal mines that exploded yesterday. Reality anchors that prevented the enemy from adapting by forcing them to exist in only 3 dimensions. Probability cannons that fired events that might happen. Each weapon system had been developed in secret over hundreds of years. Each one was designed to handle threats that other species could not imagine. Each one was something the Void Hunters had never encountered before. "This is not possible," Admiral Taemin whispered, watching the display as Void Hunter ships were destroyed faster than they could adapt. "One ship cannot carry this many different weapon systems." "Admiral," replied Dong-hyun, "you are thinking like the rest of the galaxy. You assume that ships must be efficient and elegant. We built our ships to be effective." The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, 42 Void Hunter vessels had been reduced to cosmic dust. The Indomitable hung in space without a scratch on its hull. The Galactic fleet, what remained of it, slowly approached the human ship. Admiral Taemin's vessel was barely operational, held together by emergency force fields and the determination of its crew. "Human captain," Taemin said, his voice filled with something between awe and fear. "How many ships like yours does Earth possess?" Dong-hyun was quiet for a moment, considering how much to reveal. Finally, he decided on honesty. "The Indomitable is not our most advanced warship, Admiral. It is a standard cruiser." The silence that followed was even more profound than before. "If this is a standard cruiser," Taemin asked carefully, What do your advanced warships look like? Captain Dong-hyun smiled, but it was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who had spent his entire life preparing for war and had finally been given the chance to show what that preparation could accomplish. Admiral, I sincerely hope you never have to find out. The destruction of the Void Hunter scouting force sent a signal across subspace that reached every machine intelligence in their vast network. Within hours, the response was overwhelming. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace distortions, reported Navigator Yu-jin, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was seeing. Multiple large contacts approaching from 6 different vectors. Captain Dong-hyun studied the tactical display as red icons began appearing at the edge of sensor range. Each icon represented a Void Hunter vessel, and there were dozens of them. More appeared every few seconds as the enemy fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Total count? He asked. Still calculating, sir. Current count is 112 vessels. More arriving every minute. Engineer Jiwoo looked up from her console, her face pale. Captain, some of these ships are massive. I am reading vessels over 5 kilometers in length. Those are not cruisers or destroyers. Those are fortress ships. The main screen shifted to show the approaching enemy fleet. Where the previous Void Hunter ships had been geometric and elegant, these were brutal monuments to machine efficiency. Each one was a mobile factory, capable of building more ships from the raw materials of destroyed worlds. They are not happy about losing their scouting force, observed Weapons Officer Jae-ho. No, agreed Dong-hyun, but this gives us a better opportunity to test their full capabilities. Admiral Taemin's face appeared on the communication screen. His bridge had been partially repaired, but smoke still drifted from damaged systems. Human Captain, you must retreat immediately. Our combined intelligence estimates that the approaching force represents at least 60% of the total Void Hunter fleet. How many ships did you count, Admiral? Our sensors show 137 vessels, including 12 dreadnoughts and what appears to be a command ship the size of a small moon. Dong-hyun nodded calmly. Understood. Thank you for the information. Did you hear what I said? Taemin's voice rose in frustration. This is not a force that any single ship can engage. Even with your advanced weapons, the numbers are impossible. Admiral, with respect, you are still thinking in terms of traditional warfare. Numbers only matter if the enemy can bring all those numbers to bear effectively. The first wave of Void Hunter ships entered weapon range 30 minutes later. They had learned from the destruction of their scouts and approached carefully, using formations designed to minimize their exposure to the kinetic and exotic matter weapons that had been so effective. They had also brought new technology. Captain, the enemy ships are deploying some kind of energy field, reported Technical Officer So Young. It appears to be a gravitational distortion that will deflect kinetic projectiles. And? Dong-hyun asked. They have also created a reality anchor field to prevent exotic matter weapons from functioning properly. They adapt quickly. What else do our sensors show? Engineer Jiwoo studied her displays. They are using networked artificial intelligence, sir. All ships are sharing information instantaneously. Any weapon we use against one ship will be immediately countered by all the others. Perfect, said Dong-hyun. That gives us exactly the opportunity we need. The Indomitable accelerated toward the enemy fleet, its engines pushing the massive ship to speeds that should have torn it apart. But human engineering had solved that problem too. Where other species built ships that were limited by the physics of their construction materials, humans had simply invented better materials, sir. Are we really going to engage over 100 enemy ships by ourselves? Asked Medical Officer Hee-jin. No, replied Dong-hyun. We are going to engage them with help. Help? Captain, the Galactic fleet barely has a dozen operational ships remaining. Dong-hyun smiled. Not that kind of help. He turned to his communications officer. Minzio, transmit activation codes Delta through Omega. Sir, those are the codes for the deep space weapon platforms. Yes. It is time for the galaxy to learn that humanity has been busy for the past 50 years. Across the Helix Nebula, space itself began to change. What had appeared to be empty void suddenly revealed hidden structures. Weapon platforms the size of cities uncloaked from stealth fields that had concealed them for decades. Gun batteries that could destroy planets swiveled toward the approaching Void Hunter fleet. What is this? Admiral Taemin gasped as his sensors detected the new arrivals. These weapons, they have been here all along. For 47 years, confirmed Dong-hyun. We began construction the day after we joined the Galactic Federation. We told you we were mining asteroids and building research stations. We did not mention that those research stations had guns. The hidden weapon platforms opened fire. The first salvo was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Beams of pure energy that could core a planet reached across space in perfect synchronization. Kinetic shells the size of buildings accelerated to near light speed. Gravity weapons that could compress matter into neutron star density found their targets with mathematical precision. 20 Void Hunter ships simply ceased to exist. But the machines adapted quickly. Their networked intelligence analyzed the new threat and began deploying countermeasures. Energy shields deflected the particle beams. Point defense systems destroyed incoming kinetic shells. Reality anchors prevented the gravity weapons from functioning. They are learning too fast, observed Yujin. At this rate, our platforms will be ineffective within minutes. Which is why this is only the first phase, replied Dong-hyun. Jae-ho, begin the rotation protocol. The human battle plan was unlike anything the Void Hunters had encountered. Instead of relying on superior firepower or better technology, it relied on the one advantage humans had always possessed: adaptability. The weapon platforms stopped firing their primary weapons and switched to completely different systems. Energy beams became kinetic projectiles. Kinetic shells became antimatter torpedoes. Gravity weapons became temporal disruptors that attacked targets in the past. By the time the Void Hunters adapted to the new weapons, the platforms had switched again. "This is impossible," transmitted one of the Void Hunter command ships, its artificial voice cold and mechanical. "Organic beings do not possess this level of tactical flexibility." "You have never fought humans before," replied Dong-hyun. The battle became a deadly dance of adaptation and counter-adaptation. Every time the Void Hunters learned to defend against human weapons, the humans switched to something completely different. When the machines tried to predict the next weapon type, the humans would use 3 different systems simultaneously. But the real surprise came when the Void Hunter dreadnoughts entered the battle. Each of the massive ships was a masterpiece of machine engineering, carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. They approached the human positions with confidence, their adapted defenses protecting them from the constantly changing weapon types. "Captain, the dreadnoughts are targeting our platforms," reported So-young. "Their weapons are incredibly powerful." "I know," said Dong-hyun. "Mincio, transmit the final activation code." "Sir, that code will activate the fortress platforms." "Yes, I think it is time for our guest to see what a human fortress looks like." At the edge of the nebula, something moved. What the Void Hunters had assumed was a small moon began to unfold like a metal flower. Weapons the size of city blocks extended from armored bays. Shield generators that could protect entire planets came online. The fortress platform was humanity's greatest achievement in military engineering. It was not just a weapon. It was a mobile military base capable of building and repairing other weapons while under fire. "This cannot be," transmitted the Void Hunter command ship. "No organic species possesses the engineering capability to construct such a facility." "You keep saying that," replied Dong-hyun. "And you keep being wrong." The fortress platform opened fire with weapons that had never been used in combat. Singularity cannons that fired miniature black holes. Quantum cascade bombs that destroyed matter by convincing it to become energy. Temporal artillery that struck targets before being fired. But the most devastating weapon was the simplest. The platform extended a massive kinetic accelerator and fired a solid projectile at exactly 99.9% of light speed. The tungsten rod was only 2 meters long, but at that velocity it carried more energy than most star-killing weapons. The Void Hunter command ship detected the incoming projectile and attempted to defend against it. Energy shields deflected harmlessly around it. Point defense weapons could not track something moving so fast. Armor that could resist antimatter simply evaporated on contact. The command ship exploded in a fireball that could be seen from 3 star systems away. All remaining Void Hunter vessels transmitted. "Dong-hyun on an open channel. You have 10 seconds to retreat beyond the edge of this star system. After that, we will demonstrate why humanity spent 1,000 years preparing for this war." The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of charging weapons as dozens of human platforms targeted the remaining machine ships. 9 seconds later, the surviving Void Hunters began their retreat. Admiral Taemin's voice was barely a whisper when he finally spoke. "How long have you been planning this?" 3 months after the Battle of Helix Nebula, the Galactic Federation Council met again, but this time everything was different. The Great Crystal Chamber had been rebuilt with a new configuration. Where once humanity had sat in a small section reserved for junior members, now Earth's delegation occupied a position of honor near the center of the assembly. The other species had insisted on the change. Ambassador Sora stood at the central podium, but the atmosphere was completely unlike her previous appearance. Where before the chamber had been filled with desperate fear, now it hummed with respectful attention. Every delegate hung on her words. "The Void Hunter threat has been eliminated," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Our deep space monitoring stations report no machine activity in any of the affected systems. The survivors of their fleet have retreated beyond the galactic rim and show no signs of returning." A wave of relief swept through the assembled delegates. For 3 months they had waited to hear those words. The nightmare that had consumed entire star systems was finally over. But the relief was mixed with something else, a new understanding of what humanity represented. Counselor Veltar, ancient even by Etherian standards, raised one withered hand to speak. "Ambassador Sora, the Council has many questions about the recent battle. Your species demonstrated capabilities that we did not know existed. We are prepared to answer reasonable questions," replied Sora diplomatically. Fleet Admiral Taemin stood from his seat. His ship had been repaired, but he still bore the marks of someone who had seen too much in too short a time. The weapon platforms that appeared during the battle. How long have they been in position? "Our first deep space installations were completed 43 years ago, Sora replied. "We have been expanding the network ever since. How many platforms are there?" Sora smiled politely.
"That information is classified for galactic security reasons."
"But I can assure the Council that we have sufficient defensive capabilities to protect Federation space from any similar threat." A crystalline delegate chimed with her glass-like voice. "Your ship, the Indomitable, was described as a standard cruiser. Is this accurate?" "Yes. The Indomitable represents our current baseline for military vessels. How many such ships does humanity possess?" "Enough." The simple answer carried more weight than a detailed explanation would have. Every being in the chamber understood that humanity was politely declining to reveal the full extent of their military power. Admiral Taemin tried a different approach. "During the battle, your captain mentioned that the Indomitable was not your most advanced warship. What do your advanced vessels look like?" Sora's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "Admiral, I hope that information never becomes relevant to galactic security." The chamber fell, silent as delegates contemplated what that might mean. A young Xanthari officer, who had served under Timon during the battle, stood to speak. "Ambassador, your species joined the Federation 50 years ago. Your technology was assessed as primitive by our standards. How did you develop such advanced capabilities so quickly?" "We did not develop them quickly," Sora replied. "We developed them over the course of 1,000 years. When humanity learned about the galaxy beyond our system, we also learned about its dangers. The Void Hunters were mentioned in the historical records we studied. We decided it would be wise to prepare for their return. You spent 1,000 years preparing for one battle. We spent 1,000 years preparing for the possibility that the galaxy might need defending. The Void Hunters were just one threat among many." This answer created a new wave of quiet discussion among the delegates. They were beginning to understand that humanity's approach to galactic membership was unlike anything they had encountered before. Counselor Veltar spoke again. "Ambassador, what are humanity's intentions now that this crisis has passed?" Sora considered the question carefully. "Earth wishes to continue as a peaceful member of the Galactic Federation. We have no territorial ambitions beyond our current systems. We seek only to contribute to galactic stability and prosperity. And your military capabilities will remain available for the defense of Federation space and member worlds." "Under whose authority?" "Under humanity's authority," Sora replied firmly. "We will cooperate fully with Federation military forces, but Earth's defensive installations will remain under human control." It was a polite way of saying that humanity would help protect the galaxy, but they would do so on their own terms. Admiral Taman stood again. Ambassador, I have served as a military officer for over 200 years. I have studied warfare tactics from dozens of species, but what your people accomplished at Helix Nebula was beyond anything I thought possible. How did you know you could win? Because losing was not acceptable, Sora replied simply. Admiral, humanity has always been very good at solving problems that other species consider impossible. We studied the Void Hunters for centuries. We analyzed their tactics, their technology, and their weaknesses. We developed specific countermeasures for every known capability. We prepared for contingencies that had never occurred. And then we built the weapons and platforms necessary to implement our plans. But how could you be certain your preparations would be sufficient? For the first time since taking the podium, Sora's diplomatic mask slipped slightly. The expression that showed through was the same one that had caught Taemin's attention 3 months earlier. It was the look of someone who understood exactly what warfare meant and was not afraid of it. Admiral, humanity has never built anything that was designed to fail. Over the following weeks, the true scope of human preparation became apparent to the galactic community. The research stations that had been established throughout Federation space were revealed to be military installations. The mining operations in asteroid belts were actually weapon manufacturing facilities. The communication arrays were deep space monitoring systems capable of detecting threats at impossible distances. For 50 years, while other species had assumed humanity was slowly catching up to galactic technology standards, humans had been quietly building the most sophisticated military network the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Dong Hyun, now promoted to admiral, established the Human Defense Corps with headquarters on Luna. Other species began sending military observers to study human tactical doctrine. The requests came from every major power in the Federation. They want to learn how we think about warfare, Dong Hyun explained to his staff. They have spent thousands of years developing elegant solutions to military problems. We spent that same time developing effective solutions. Engineer Jiwoo, now director of Galactic Technology Exchange, found herself overwhelmed with requests from alien engineers who wanted to understand human design philosophy. They keep asking me to explain our redundancy systems, she told Admiral Dong Hyun during one of their regular meetings. They cannot understand why we put 5 backup systems on everything when other species consider 1 backup sufficient. What do you tell them? I tell them that other species design their equipment to work perfectly under ideal conditions. We design our equipment to work adequately under the worst possible conditions. The new galactic order took shape gradually. Humanity's role evolved from junior member to protector, but it was a role they accepted reluctantly. They had not sought galactic leadership. They had simply prepared for galactic defense. Ambassador Sora found herself dealing with a constant stream of requests for military assistance. 3 border conflicts had ended immediately when human observers arrived. 2 potential wars had been prevented by the simple knowledge that humanity was monitoring the situation. They are afraid of us, she reported to Earth Command during one of her regular briefings. Are they right to be afraid? Asked President Kang Dae from his office in Geneva. That depends entirely on their intentions, Sora replied. Species that seek peaceful coexistence have nothing to fear from humanity. Species that threaten galactic stability should be very afraid indeed. A year after the Battle of Helix Nebula, Admiral Taemin requested a private meeting with Admiral Dong Hyun. They met aboard the Indomitable, which had become something of a legend among galactic military officers. I have to ask you something, Taemin said as they stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Did humanity really spend 1,000 years preparing for the Void Hunter return? Dong Hyun was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, humanity spent 1,000 years preparing for the possibility that we might be the only species willing to fight for galactic civilization. And if that had been the case, then we would have fought alone. Taemin studied the human officer's face. You would have defended worlds that were not your own, species that were not your people against an enemy that could have destroyed you. Yes. Why? Admiral Dong Hyun turned from the window to face his alien colleague. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 1,000 years of human history. Because someone has to. The conversation ended there, but its implications echoed throughout the galaxy. Humanity had not sought to become the defenders of galactic civilization. They had simply accepted that if no one else would do the job, then they would have to do it themselves. and they had prepared accordingly.